All right. Welcome everyone to How to Be Your Own Therapist. This is an open-ended 60-minute discussion, and we welcome questions. Today we have Martin Ström with us. He is a longtime Dharma student and a licensed psychologist. He found the Dharma in 2003 at the November course at Kopan Monastery. One day I'll go. And he is currently in Melbourne. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if, like last time, if you want to kick us off with the refuge prayer and pull it up, that would be wonderful.
Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chonam La Janju Bardu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Choyen Gipe Sonam Namgi Drola Pencher Sangye Through Parshok.
All right, so I thought today I would actually follow up on something that came up last session, which is karma. So I thought I would share a few thoughts on that came up for me after the last session that we had. But before we get into that, I thought we could just start with brief meditation to settle the mind and bring our attention into where we are at the moment and into this as a preparation for this session. So just start by finding a comfortable position, a position that embodies wakefulness, alertness, and vigilance, even though we remain relaxed and calm. We want to be mentally alert. So there is clarity and stability along with the relaxation. And we can start by just letting our awareness, our attention come down from the head into the body. If you want, you can allow your awareness to gravitate towards somewhere in your body where you feel stability, solidity, firmness. So that might be, for example, the contact between the buttocks and whatever you're sitting on. Just that sensation of being carried or held up. But in general, allowing your attention to drop down further into the body and see if you can connect with those sensations of groundedness and stability. But then from there, I would invite you to turn your attention to something in our experience that is often overlooked, which is the quality of awareness itself. So see if you can turn your attention to the fact that you are in this moment aware. So this space of awareness, that's where everything we experience appear. It's like the clear blue open sky in which clouds form. And most of the time we're preoccupied with and hypnotized by the clouds, by the content of our experience, rather than just awareness itself. So see if you can, for a moment, identify more with that clear blue open sky, with the openness, the spaciousness of your experience in this moment. And this quality of knowing, this awareness, it is the one constant in our experience. Everything changes. Thoughts, emotions, external stimuli, sounds and sights and tactile sensations. It all changes constantly, from moment to moment, from day to day, from year to year. But the one constant is awareness, the space in which everything arises, pure knowing of whatever arises. So see if you can rest in that for a few more moments. Okay, and with that, we can then open up our eyes and get this session started. All right, so I thought I would just present a few thoughts on the Buddhist concept of karma. So it's and I think one of the wonderful things with the Buddha was that he never expected anyone to you know, just believe him because he said something. He encouraged everyone to test what he taught against their own experience. And so this is, for me, I think all Buddhist teachings are, like hypotheses that I can take on and test and see what seems to make sense and what is useful. And karma is one of those Buddhist teachings that can be quite challenging at times, and it's definitely very, very different from the worldview that most of us hold, and what would be the prevailing worldview in our Western societies and our modern societies, which is a worldview of scientific materialism, and I think that's actually a good place to start, because the way we usually view the world is that there's some kind of objective reality outside us, and that's the world as it is, whether we're here to experience it or not. So it was, the universe was here before we came along. Somehow consciousness suddenly evolved on this remote planet that we find ourselves on. But the world was there before us, and it was doing fine without anyone being conscious within it. But that's not at all the view in Buddhism. So actually this concept that we have of a singular universe in the Buddhist tradition, that's different, because the word for universe would be loka, which means I guess it means world or place, but it's in Buddhism it's always in plural. So sometimes it's translated as world systems rather than a universe. And the idea is that a loka, or a world, is always an experienced world. So it's the world of a sentient being. You can't speak of a loka or world without someone being there to experience it. So in a sense, I live in my universe, in which I am the center in a sense. So, and that world is unique to me, and every other sentient being inhabits their universe, and their experience is unique to them. And then obviously it's quite clear that we have this sense of experiencing something objective out there. But from a Buddhist perspective, that's more of you might call it an intersubjective experience, because the content of the world that we are all experiencing is in fact the result of our karma. So every experience that we have, we can only have that experience from a Buddhist perspective because we have created the karmic conditions for that very experience. So in a sense, we are creating the world we experience by the actions that we perform with body, speech, and mind. And that's karma, basically just means action. So everything we do is shaping whatever future experiences we will have. So I guess one way of, it's not quite right, but one way of viewing the world that we're experiencing is that, in a sense, it's kind of a projection of our own minds. Or at least we could say that there's this extremely intimate connection between what we can see as external physical reality and our own minds, the consciousness which is experiencing that seemingly outer world. And this is a very, very difficult concept to wrap one's head around. I've tried myself for the better part of 20 years, and it definitely makes more sense to me, and it seems more valid and true than a strictly materialistic view, for reasons that I won't go into now. But anyways, this is the Buddhist view of what the world is, and there's this intimate connection between what we experience and the karma that we have created. So basically, there is the karma we create and the afflictions that we have in our mind, and that is what's creating the samsara that we are either suffering in or temporarily joyful in. So the reason why we're on planet Earth with a bunch of other people who seem to be experiencing similar things is because we have shared or common karma. So we're human beings, which means we have created the karma to be human beings, and we're sharing that experience with, I don't know how many we are now, 8 billion or something, other human beings. But then there are other sentient beings that also share this world with us, but they seem to have a slightly different experience of things. So you could guess that it's different being an ant or a bird or a cow. So the intersubjective experience with a human is not quite as big, but they're still here with us, which means that we have shared karma with them as well. And so when I remember when I was younger and contemplating for things like why would a child, for example, be born in really horrible situations? Why someone born into an area where there is war or famine or other that type of just blatant suffering. And I think from the way I see it, there are people come up with basically three different explanations for that kind of thing. And it's also not, why is someone born into a horrible situation? It would also be, why is someone born into a really wonderful situation with, in a great environment with good resources and so on and so forth. And I can identify three main ways that people would explain that. And the first one, or which would be I would say, most common view in a materialistic scientific society is that it's pure chance. It's just random. There's this randomness to how DNA is evolving and animals are evolving over time, and then they're just randomly born here and there and randomly have different types of experiences. So chance, basically. And the other type of explanation would be more along the lines of it being God's will, and God moves in mysterious ways. So he creates some people and put them in a starving situation in Africa. He creates other people and put them in wonderful situations in some affluent country somewhere. So so God's will, and it's beyond us to understand the inner mechanics of that, I guess. And then the third type of explanation that I've come across is the view of karma, which basically says that everything that we experience, the type of rebirth we take, the fact that we become human beings in this life, the environment we experience, the type of world we find ourselves in, how we're being treated by other people, other sentient beings, that's all due to karma. So it means that we have created the karmic causes for whatever we're experiencing. And that's, for me, that's the most sensible view. It's the most empowering view, and I find it to be the most helpful view. But that's just me, and I'm presenting this view, and then we'll see what you think, or maybe you've been pondering this for decades, same way I have. But for me, I think like I said, it's actually a really empowering view. So my teacher, Lama Alan Wallace, you might have heard of, he tells this story about when he first came to India in the 70s. He ended up living for a while, I don't know, a number of years, I think, in a Tibetan refugee community. And he says that he has never before or since met more happy and joyful people. So these were, refugees. They escaped Tibet, which was completely ravaged and destroyed by the Chinese occupation. So these were people who had just suffered through the most horrendous things, who had been, many times tortured, and who had loved ones killed, and had their entire culture basically wiped out, and they've been forced into exile, and then they're now living in this refugee community where there's basically nothing. They're extremely poor and in extremely dire straits, but at the same time, for whatever reason, they're also very happy and very joyful and very kind and very compassionate. At least this is Alan's experience of them. And the way that Alan understood a lot of this is that they did have this view of karma, which meant that they weren't bitter, and they weren't destroyed by the circumstances they found themselves in. Rather, they had a way of understanding their situation, and they had a way of working with their mind given the situation that they were in. So having the view of karma actually seemingly helped them to cope with their situation extremely well. And I have another just a personal experience. I think it was around 2010, I met a Gelugpa monk named Palden Gyatso. He later passed away, I think, in 2018. But so he was in Stockholm and giving teachings, and he was sharing some of his life story. And so he was imprisoned in Tibet, and he spent something like I believe 33 years in Chinese concentration camps, or re-education camps, as they were called. And during this time, he was regularly tortured, beaten with a club with nails on it, and he was shocked. They would shove an electric probe into his mouth, so he had his tongue and teeth were damaged, and he would be whipped and starved and so on. So it's just this horrible situation for years and years. But then and again, I had this. He was just this amazing being, just beaming of joy and sharing wonderful teachings. And yeah, it was just, you could really, it was just amazing being in his presence. So you could really tell that this was someone very special, and he had not been destroyed from this horrible experience that he had. But then he was sharing how he finally escaped Tibet and came to India. And early on, he had the opportunity to have an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And during this, so they had something like I don't know, 30-minute interview, or I don't know exactly how long it was, but they had a chat basically. And during this chat, the Dalai Lama asked Palden Gyatso, so during all this time that you were imprisoned, were you never afraid? Or were you ever afraid? And Palden Gyatso answered that yes, there were many times that I was afraid, and I was afraid of losing my compassion with my captors. That's what scared him. And I found that to be extremely powerful. And it's from the way we would usually think, it's such a strange thing to say, and it's such a foreign, alien, strange way to think. Like, why would you think that way? But again, if you have the view of karma, you're in this horrible situation, but you're actually in that situation. You actually have the opportunity to purify past negative karma. And the people who are tormenting you, they are tormenting you because in the past you created the karma for that. So sometime in the past, you would have treated them terribly. And this is why what's happening is happening. And at the same time, you see these people committing just atrocious acts and extremely negative karma. And then that that karma will ripen for them in the future as extreme and terrible suffering. And if you don't in that moment break that karmic cycle with them, then you will be part of that ongoing cycle. And it's just it's just when you see that and that is your view of the world, the only possible response is compassion. So it can be extremely empowering, but it's also it can be a very, very challenging worldview to take on board. And I think one of the reasons why it is challenging for us is maybe we have culturally a Christian background where there is a God who the reason from a Christian perspective, right or wrong, is literally wrong is that which God says is wrong, and right is that which God says is right. So that's the basis of morality in Christianity, which is I'm not criticizing. It's just different from the Buddhist view. But that also means that the suffering you experience would be God's will. So if you're being punished, it's because someone is punishing you, and if you're being rewarded, it's because someone is rewarding you. So we have this view of punishment and reward. If bad things happen to us, we're being then punished, and that sits strangely with the view of karma, because then it feels like bad things are punishment for the bad things we've done, and good things are reward for the good things we've done. But that is not at all the view in Buddhism. There is no punisher or rewarder. There is no karma god who doles out punishments or rewards. It's just karma is just simply a natural process. It's just the way things are. And it's easier to understand how that can be if, again, we have this view of how intimately our consciousness is intertwined with what we view as external reality. So we are really shaping our own world by shaping our own minds. And one of the traps that we can fall into is that if we see people who are in bad situations and worse off than we are, then if we misunderstand karma completely, we would think, oh yeah, it's just their karma. Why should I help them? They're just reaping the fruits of their own actions, and we become callous and we don't care because we have completely misunderstood and completely lost the plot. Because if we fully understand karma, then the only reasonable response to that for ourselves and for others is compassion. Because the Buddha said that being under the sway or under the influence of karma and afflictions, he gave a number of metaphors or what do you call it? Similes. Well, anyways, he gave 5 of them. I believe it's 5. Anyways, he said that being under the sway of karma and afflictions is like being in bondage. So imagine being in shackles and locked in a cage. You have you have no freedom because you're completely you're completely in bondage by your own karma and affliction. So that's one. The other one is being indebted. So you have this huge debt to someone that you're trying to pay off. And the third one is being sick. So you're really afflicted by this illness, and you're suffering from it, and you just wish to get well, but you can't. And then the fourth one is you're enslaved, so you're not free. You're in someone's servitude, so you can't do what you want. You have to obey your master because you're a slave. And the master is karma and afflictions, which is a terrible master to have. And then the fifth one the Buddha gave is like it's being lost in a desert track. So you're just wandering aimlessly. You're completely lost. You have no idea where you're going. So being under the influence of karma and afflictions, which we all are until we become enlightened and see through the charades. But as long as we are under the influence of those forces, it is like being in bondage, being indebted, being sick, being enslaved, and being lost in a desert track. So it's so when we see that, the only reasonable reaction is compassion, because it is the situation that every sentient being finds themselves in. It is samsara, and it is really shitty. But if we don't understand karma, we also don't understand why this is happening to us. Why do I find myself here, and what can I do about it? And I guess that's the empowering part of having the view of karma, is what can I do about it? And there is something you can do about it. Because if you create skillful karma, positive karma, virtuous karma, then that's the way out of it all, because then you will create future experiences that are very different than from the ones you would create if you create unskillful karma, negative karma, non-virtuous karma. So yeah, we literally there is, from the Buddhist perspective, there was no one who created us. We didn't just pop into existence by chance. We literally created ourselves. And not only did we create ourselves, we also created the world we inhabit together with other sentient beings. We created all of that ourselves. And that's what karma is. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share from coming in from the last session we had, and the situation that or the discussion that came up was around the wild fires that are raging, and why people are suffering from that, and how unacceptable it can seem to kind of blame that on karma, or use karma as the explanation for why something terrible like that would happen to someone. And it is a very, very challenging view, and we need to not fall into the trap of punishment or reward or any of those kind of wrong views that can follow if we misunderstand the teachings of karma. But at the same time, I can only say for myself that having this view of karma is the most empowering and most the best way that I have found to make sense of the reality we're experiencing. But again, this is, I try to present the Buddhist view, but it's up to anyone to discover or explore whether it makes sense, whether they find it helpful, or if it's a reasonable way to view reality, a lens through which we can understand what's happening to ourselves and others. Yeah, so that's
I think
Go ahead.
for me, I think the problem with the Eastern and the Western thinking is, in the West, we are all victims, and we celebrate our victimhood. We all of the bad things, they're badges of honor.
Yeah.
And so taking that responsibility on yourself, that's a difficult thing to stomach when you are the victim of everything. You're a victim of God. You're a victim of, you know, the way you were raised, your religion, whatever. So yes, it can be terribly difficult to stomach when you think of these wildfires, and you think, well, yes, they're the victim of a wildfire.
Yeah.
It's nature.
Yeah, and I mean, we always looking for someone to blame. It's my parents' fault, it's God's fault, or whoever we're pointing the finger at. But um the I mean, the empowering thing, like someone said, that was some first time I heard this was Buddhist monk in Sweden. He said, whenever you're pointing your finger at someone, there's at least 3 fingers pointing back at you. And yeah, I think that's good, because the only, if we need to blame someone, the only one we can ultimately blame is ourselves. But it's blame is absolutely useless. I mean, more helpful is to look at the situation and see what kind of actions lead to what kind of results, and then start changing our behavior in accordance with that kind of clear seeing and wisdom and insight. And blaming anyone really doesn't help in that. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on what I said in the beginning, that it's either chance, or it's God's will, or it's karma? Do you see a fourth option there, or does that cover people's views pretty well, would you say?
Chance, just fate.
Yeah.
I don't know if fate's the right word. And then a micromanaging deity, gives to some and not to all.
Yeah.
As a Westerner, yeah, the karma thing is difficult for me to stomach. I had my first experience of it the other day. I'm a retired police officer, and I live in the town that I worked in. And I went into a convenience store last week, and as I always am, I was smiley and polite, and I thought I recognized the woman at the counter, but I didn't. I didn't know for sure if I knew her, and she was very angry. She was very, very angry with me, and she was. And that moment of, oh, I've done something to her in the past,
Mm.
Oh, sorry, there's Tasha. I may not remember, even in this life. But yeah, I just needed to accept it and and pray for her.
Mm.
I I don't know how I would resolve it now. you know, those are her opinions. So, and that's none of my business how she feels. I just know that I need to just accept her anger.
Yeah.
It's a hard pill to swallow, I'll be honest.
Sorry, what was that last thing?
That's a hard pill to swallow. You know,
Yeah,
yeah. To take in.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, what by approaching that situation with, patience and kindness and not reacting in kind, then I mean you break that karmic cycle, because if the reason this person is attacking you is that sometime in some previous life you attacked them, if you then attack them back, you're just again creating the causes for the same thing to happen over and over and over again. And yeah, so if we can assume that responsibility, that if someone is attacking us, it is because we, even though we're not currently aware of it, but we did create the causes for that, then we can just think, I'm sorry for whatever I did, and what can we do from here? It's the ego doesn't like that approach, but it's the most helpful and most beneficial approach for sure. Yeah, I had one of my teachers said that karma is kind of like, you throw a boomerang, and then it takes lifetimes, but then eventually, this boomerang that you threw out into the universe, it will circle around and hit you in the head, and then you'll be like, oh, who threw that at my head? Who threw that boomerang? Because you've long forgotten ever throwing that boomerang, and now it just circles back and smacks you in the head, and then you get upset and start pointing fingers left and right, but it was always you who threw it in the first place.
So regret versus repentance or
guilt or
guilt. Yeah.
And that that's a whole nother session with purification and what we can do about the karma that we have accumulated. But I like the image of having ingested poison. If I know that I ingested poison, I can regret doing that. It was not a very helpful thing to do, but there's no reason to feel bad or ashamed or anything. It's just, I can just see it, and then I can decide that maybe I should stop ingesting poison in the future, because it's definitely harming me. So you can be very matter-of-factly, I did that thing, it was not very good, it wasn't skillful, and let's try not to do that again. But we kind of also we confuse the action with who we are. So one bad action just paints us as a terrible, horrible person, and thinking that way and feeling that way just increases the chances that we'll go ahead and do more of the thing we're trying to avoid doing. So it's the shame and the guilt, not very helpful. But the regret and the clearly seeing what is skillful and what is unskillful, that is definitely helpful. Yeah, so we're not quite at the at the hour yet, but then again, there's also not that many of us left around. So I don't know. What do you say? Maybe maybe we leave it at this for now, or
I think that you've thoroughly explained karma. I wish no. I think I wish the person who would asked the question were here. Hopefully she's watching on YouTube, because that was there was a lot of pain in the there was a lot of pain and a lot of anger in her thoughts of karma. So yeah.
yeah, and I really felt last week, I felt I don't know, inadequate, I guess would be a good word. I felt that I wanted to yeah, provide some really clever answers then and there, and it didn't. Yeah, it wasn't. I don't think that was possible. I think just sitting with that pain and that anger was the only viable response in that moment. But then also I thought I could come back to this session and clarify a few things that might be helpful. So hopefully that person will check out the recording if it was helpful. I think it's difficult to I mean, karma is such a vast subject, so it's difficult to spend 20 or 30 minutes on it and cover it in any depth or detail. But I hope that some of that was helpful, at least.
For me, definitely. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I guess that's it for this week, and I will see you next time.
See you next week. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.